Hi, I'm going to now talk about some impacts of information breaches. So following a cyber attack, what could happen? Now impacts is not necessarily negative. Impacts are just what could happen if a breach occurs, but in lots of your exam questions, it's going to be quite negative because a cyber attack is never really going to be a positive thing, right? Of course. Just as a reminder, a breach is when somebody who shouldn't have access to information sees it or deletes it or changes it, either intentionally or accidentally. Now let's start by talking about some possible immediate effects. So an attacker has got access to data, someone has accidentally done something. What could happen immediately afterwards? Well, first of all, and possibly the cause of this breach could well be a failure of security. So this is where some of your prevention measures haven't worked. And this means potentially some confidential information could be breached in this attack. Now, this maybe doesn't seem like an impact necessarily, it maybe seems like the cause, but there could be an attack initially which leads to some other failure of security, which leads to some confidential information being leaked. But equally, this could of course lead to other issues too. So once your security fails, this could lead to a loss of IP. Now IP means a couple of things in IT. You might have heard of IP addresses. In this context, it does not mean, or it's not the same meaning as IP addresses. IP in this context stands for intellectual property. Now intellectual property are ideas. So anything a human has come up with in their head is intellectual property. So this will include things like business ideas, the software somebody has wrote, somebody's wrote some code using their brain, that's intellectual property, and also policies. We'll look at what policies are in the next video. Now this IP could well be accessed, or even in the worst case, fully lost in an attack. It could well be destroyed. And for lots of companies, their IP is one of their most valuable assets because it might be the reason they're working, right? If it's a great idea or a great bit of software, that might be the reason they're working. And so that being lost is a big issue. The failure of security could also lead to there being a loss of third-party information. Now by third party, this really means somebody else. So not someone necessarily part of your organization. Maybe like a customer would be a third party in this case. Well, they of course could have information which could well be again accessed or destroyed by an attacker. Or, this could be accidental. Of course, we can't really forget that. It could be a mistake. But still a third party, somebody else, could be affected by this. And if it was, say, a customer, and if it was, say, very personal details, this could be used to commit identity theft. This is where somebody commits fraud by pretending to be somebody they're not. So for example, if I logged into an online bank using somebody else's details, that's me committing identity theft. Another possible impact which can happen straight after an attack is loss of services and access, which means what you are doing is taken down. Maybe you've got a server running a website and the server goes down because it's been attacked. So you lose that service. Now out of our three principles, availability is being most affected here. And so it may well mean regular customers and staff might find it harder to operate. It might make life harder for your customers and your staff because something has been taken offline, because something stops working. Now these I would all say are short-term impacts. They could last a long time, but they happen fairly quickly. Some slightly longer term impacts which might happen over a few weeks, over a few months, even over a few years, are things like loss of reputation. So the reputation of a company is what other people think of them. Some companies have got a reputation for good service. Some have got a reputation for being cheap or being reliable or being helpful, all these sort of things. It takes a long time to build reputation, but it can be broken really, really quickly. So possible customers in the future and maybe even possible staff might get put off the organization if they think there is poor security. Why would you join a company if you know or you think your bank details might get leaked? You wouldn't. So that can affect their reputation. A slightly more, let's say, dramatic impact could well be a threat to national security. Now, this only really relates to classified information. So classified is really our most private category. Usually we're talking about governments here. So governments might have really, really, really important information which might be considered classified. Well, if this was breached, then this could be used against the country. It could be used against a company, but most often national security relates to the country. So for example, this might be used to weaken the military or for law enforcement. Let's say there was classified information about a new weapon the military were developing. But if that was breached, that might mean in the future that weapon is not as useful, and so it might damage the security of the entire country. That is what a threat to national security is all about. A tiny shop being hacked is not a threat to national security, but the police or the government being hacked might well be. Just to give you a few more potential impacts which aren't listed by the exam board, but I think you should know about and you should definitely write about if you need to in an exam. So following an attack, there will be ongoing costs to fix and improve security. If your security has failed, you should invest in better security, and of course you've got to fix it, which costs money, and also time is spent to recover from the attack. You also might have lawsuits, especially if third-party information was leaked. You might get sued, and you might be forced to pay compensation. Equally, you might volunteer compensation. That can be very expensive. Lawsuits come from individual people or groups of people, but you can also get fined from the government. We looked at the Data Protection Act and some of the consequences of having bad security. That can cost a lot of money, especially if you are a big organisation. And a last impact which could cause further issues down the line is there might all be further opportunistic attacks. And by this I mean, if another attacker notices that you were hacked, they might think, well, hang on, their security must be quite bad, and so they might try and hack you. So, having one breach might lead to further breaches because you are a bit of a target, and maybe that reputation gets affected, and so other people think they can attack you. So it could cause further attacks down the line just based on that reputation.